en anglais ou en français?
Parfait. Merci, c'est mes questions. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Sorry, Mr. Kuhn. I was on mute that time. The floor is now yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that, and good afternoon, Mr. Oldfield. Thank you for your recommendations, which are thorough and certainly designed to be effective. I recognize many of them as examples of, or you can think of examples where some version of them have been applied somewhere else in the world, Canada, US, elsewhere. So we know that they are effective, or in most cases not doing the going first. I'm one of the two remaining members of the original Select Committee on Climate Change. Jules Lepage, representing Restigouche, is the other, who are still sitting in the legislature. And we were very proud of the Select Committee report that all of us were from the three parties involved at the time. It's interesting looking back, one of the things we did was recommended was that the government provide flood hazard mapping publicly in the form of a web-based atlas kind of system, and that was just released last week. So the recommendations were made 5 years and 3 months ago, but they have come to pass. What hasn't come to pass, though, as I look at it, is we also made a recommendation that the National Energy Code and the National Building Code be adopted in the year they're released, and that training be carried out to make the implementation smooth in New Brunswick. That hasn't occurred, so I was pleased to see your recommendation on adopting the National Energy Code for buildings, because as we've been told, we're operating on essentially 2010 measures for new construction, and that's just perpetuating a lot of energy waste. So what I wanted to ask you about that was, do you have any sense from your work at the municipal level, where most of the building inspectors are and so on, why it's taking so long in New Brunswick compared to other provinces to actually implement the latest National Building Code and related energy code that is designed to ensure that energy waste is stamped out and carbon footprints are reduced?
Thank you, David. It's a good question. Probably a combination of things at play here. One, again, going back to capacity, and in terms of building bylaw enforcement, bylaw enforcement in general in New Brunswick. So that's one aspect. The other would be the training part. Requires that the province invest in those opportunities, or incentivizes that through the education system, provides professional development opportunities, and even through the Association for Building Professionals. I forget the exact name. So I think it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing. Yes, you want the professionals to be ready to undertake the necessary compliance efforts, but you also need the policy that drives that. And I think without that policy, without updating or at least having a timeline for the adoption of those codes, preferably when they are released federally, then that just sort of leaves it in a bit of a disarray. So I think you need to start setting a timeline for the adoption of those updated codes, and then look at working with the required building professionals and associations to ensure that training can take place in the time frame allotted, rather than waiting to set that date at a later date.
Thanks for that. Just quickly, you mentioned in passing that municipalities cannot get at $290 million, I think you said, through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Can you just explain that? It caught my attention a little more, so we understand what the problem is.
As you know, FCM's Green Municipal Fund provides funding for green infrastructure projects across Canada, and one of the new tranches of funding that they released about a year ago is called Community Efficiency Financing Program. It's actually up to $350 million in that particular program to support long-term low-cost efficiency financing programs across Canada. In the first round, they accepted applications for ready-to-go projects as well as applications for studies. It's now an open call for proposals. Literally any municipality or municipal association and in partnership with their utilities can apply to this funding. And to give you an example of that, Pace Atlantic, which operates in Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island, which ironically shares a very similar legislative environment with respect to this topic, to us, they've secured 24 million, I think it was over 24 million from the FCM Community Efficiency Financing Program. And they've already had a great success in allocating some of those loans to efficiency retrofits in Charlottetown, Stratford, and Wolfville, Nova Scotia. So something very similar could be achieved here. And all it requires is that authority to allow for efficiency financing programs to be set up so that a municipality may make an application to FCM and receive those grants.
That requires some kind of legislative change?
Again, there can be two ways to go about this. There's opening up the Local Governance Act and ensuring that authority is explicitly in there, such as it is in Nova Scotia. There would also be a requirement to look at the preferred way for a billing system to be arranged, because of course it's collected through property tax installments to pay back those loans. So if it's collected provincially, how do you redisperse that to the municipalities where those efficiency retrofits take place? And the municipalities need to be able to check on the liens. So there's one way is to update the act. Another way is to introduce a separate piece of legislation that deals specifically with this and provides maybe different options for municipalities, municipal utilities, third parties, and even provincial, let's say the Crown Corp, New Brunswick Power, to undertake a provincial level program. In fact, what may work best for New Brunswick is a bit of both. You have a provincial program that aligns the low-cost loans with the efficiency incentives and are administered provincially through a Crown corporation like NB Power. And you have the ability for New Brunswick municipalities and their local utilities to implement similar types of efficiency, or at least a portal for that efficiency financing locally.
So you did speak a lot about the importance of financing, accessibility to financing for energy efficiency improvements and adoption of renewable energy technologies. Can you expand a little bit on why that is? Why did you devote the time you did to speak on financing?
I think because we've known that this is an opportunity. First of all, it's a measure that has worked successfully in at least 4 other provinces in Canada and also globally. There are many other examples of this, so we're not reinventing the wheel. This is something that we know works. But of course, the legislative environment is different in each of these jurisdictions. So we had to take our time to look at what those particular challenges were. And we did that through consultation with the province, with the municipal working group that we have. We also talked to other jurisdictions about what works and how it works. So we came up with a set of ideas around how to make it work in New Brunswick. And then more recently, there was the Community Efficiency Financing Program that was launched, as I mentioned, but was no municipality in New Brunswick accessed those fundings for the reasons I've mentioned. And Pace Atlantic was set up and shows us that in a similar legislative environment in PEI, which also doesn't have the explicit sort of details in their legislation, they are able to do it, and they found a way to do it. So we made a submission to the municipal reform process that outlines that in a lot of detail. But unfortunately, through that reform process, those sort of things got left on the back burner, with the focus being on, of course, on the amalgamations.
Thanks for that. You with respect to renewables, said there's a need to update the Electricity Act in order to drive more renewable energy development. Could you provide a little more detail on the rationale for that?
Certainly. At the moment, municipalities who may wish to integrate local renewable energy systems, whether it's at a site level or at a community scale, are unable to do so viably due to the fact that there isn't the right policy in place. Under the Electricity Act right now, installations are limited to 100 kilowatts. The embedded generation has reached its cap, so NB Power, under current regulation, has got no interest in procuring more domestically sourced renewables. However, of course, with the closure, not the closure, but the considerations around Beldoon, the province is going to have to look at sourcing a supply of electricity from clean sources that could be a combination of domestically procured renewables, as well as imported hydro, as well as other options that are on the table. So I think that there's a real opportunity here for slight updates to the Electricity Act, including improving the net metering cap, so larger community scale solar installations can be installed to create a virtual net metering program that allows citizens to purchase power segments or lease panels on their and gain the credits against their electricity bills. There's the need for increasing the embedded generation cap. Otherwise, what reason does NB Power have to procure domestically sourced renewable energy? And along with that, the previous LORIS program was, I would say, semi-successful. The policy had perhaps the right intentions, but in essence, because it wasn't designed as effectively as it could have, it favored the lowest cost, which was large-scale 20 megawatt wind farms, not all of which went forward. And so we have a LORIS program that was designed to enable these small-scale, locally owned renewable energy systems, but which excluded, for the most part, many of those smaller-scale renewable energy systems. And that's why we propose to not only increase the cap on embedded gen, but provide a new LORIS program that's redesigned with 3 tiers. The 3 tiers will allow for that diversification at the local scale and still achieve the sort of renewable targets that the province has.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.